Hello, and happy Monday, everyone. Welcome into another episode of Titan Talk. I'm Isaiah, and Pon is joining me again because Kilgoon is still out enjoying his vacation. It's going to be kind of a more chill show just because we've got Open Beta 14 that's going to be going live tomorrow. So we're just going to hang out. We're going to quickly recap some of the patch notes and stuff that are live now on SMITE2.com. So if you missed any of the shows last week, you can check out the full patch notes on the website. And we'll probably go in game and show off a couple things that were kind of work in progress the last time that we went in game, just to kind of get everybody in the know before our update tomorrow. But before we get into it, Pon, you doing all right?
Yeah, doing great. I was careful this time not to do the aggressive yo.
Yeah, I know, right? The jump scare yo.
Yeah, the jump scare yo. But yeah, no, I'm doing great. It's a good Monday. Got a good weekend in, so
sweet.
Things are good.
Well, I will bring up the handy dandy desktop, and let's just quickly go through Open Beta 14 patch notes. Got that nice big image of Sun Wukong at the top, and we'll quickly go through these. I don't think really, I can only think of one thing that we talked about last week that has changed since we went over it, but we'll get to that when we get to it. We've got a nice summary here. Sun Wukong joining the battleground, which is the big deal for the update tomorrow. Really awesome kind of hybrid scaling kit where you can build some intelligence to get some more unique effects, extending the range of that 1 and 2, as well as the aspect that is going to be going live this Friday with some more play around just your transformations. Pon, I know you kind of workshop the aspect. How are you feeling about it?
Yeah, I'm super excited. I mean, first off, the hybrid scaling for him is really neat. We try and find cool places to do hybrid scaling just instead of doing it for the sake of doing it. Yeah. And his really worked out really well. But the aspect was something that we had gone back and forth with the previous version, and this version I think is going to feel really, really good. Yeah. And it gives you a unique way of locking in your playstyle. And obviously I saw people theory crafting of if I was playing him support, which one would be the best one? If I went solo, which one's the best? Can I try and make the I think people are trying to figure out how to make the tire one work the most. Just interesting puzzles for people to solve.
I know, right? I saw a couple of people saying, I'm just going to lock an Eagle form for my Sun Wukong mid and just get the low cooldowns and start poking people with my intelligence build. So, it'll be really cool. I'm super excited for Sun Wukong. We are officially a MOBA starting on Tuesday now that Sun Wukong is going to be hitting the battleground. So, I'm looking forward to everybody hopping in and playing with the Monkey King.
Oh yeah, and Clumsy even mentioned Tiger 1 got buffed post flash test.
So. Oh, nice, awesome.
I know there's also a lot of fixes that came from the flash test, so thanks to everyone who flash tested some of
them. Oh yeah, there were lots of weird things with the scalings that got polished up for sure. Definitely appreciate all the bug reports and feedback that we got from last week's flash tests. We've got a couple of Wandering Market additions. The first one is the new Saga Vault, and that card art is super sick.
Yeah, that's
for
sick.
The Emberlord Vulcan. This is kind of a new thing that we're doing as a part of the Wandering Market, basically to where we've got these new Saga skins that are going to be evolving kind of, and you have 4 different forms that you can choose from as you progress through this vault that you can unlock, as well as the first ever recall skins that are joining Smite 2 as well. So it's super sick. So if you pick it up, you get kind of the first version, which is First Flame, Emberlord Vulcan, and then as you progress, get those Wandering Market coins and unlock things in the Saga Vault, you get kind of this upgraded version of the skin all the way up to Inferno Incarnate, and then Inferno Incarnate has 4 prisms with it as well. And we're going to go in game and show that off.
There's so much going on in that Saga skin. It's really sick.
It's awesome. So yeah, after we get through patch notes, whenever we showed off the Vulcan skin in game last week, it was kind of work in progress, but we wanted to take some time and show it off in its full glory. So once we get through these patch notes recap, we'll go in game and show it off because it's looking really sick. And then we've got the Nerd Traveler as well. Nerd Rage Cabrakan is joining the battleground as the next classic skin. And it's got some really awesome prisms in this Traveler too that you can pick up.
Yep.
Other new cosmetics and skins. Bit Blaster Apollo is the cross-gen skin in this update. So if you owned it in Smite 1, you'll get it immediately unlocked in Smite 2. And then there are also 4 prisms that you can unlock for it as well. For quality of life and new player improvements, we've got some things for quick play. We've added a progress bar underneath your item HUD, just a better show whenever you're getting enough gold for your next item.
Yeah, because it's a little bit weird because we're taking a system that is meant to have dynamic gold amounts for items, and so you never know when you're actually going to get an item because you might have rolled an expensive one. This at least better conveys that and gives people an idea of I'm going to be backing in the next 10 seconds or so because I'll have enough gold.
Cool. And while we are talking about quick play, I'm going to skip ahead. We hammered in on some quick play joust stuff last week. we decided we're not going to ship quick play joust in this
Yes.
update. It's just not to the standard to where we want to ship it at. We've got some things that we want to fix up. So we're still working on it, but it is not going to be live in this update. Just some things that we need to fix up for the mode.
We made a lot of bot improvements, and especially like if you've played like the quick play arena and like you've played against the bots, they'll put up a good fight.
Oh,
but when
yeah.
it comes to like making sure that they do the right time, like if the situation calls for pushing a tower, making sure they do that in the way that you expect it to,
Yeah.
stuff like that. There's a lot of more complicated logic when it comes to joust, and so we just want to refine that a bit
How do
more.
they play around objectives
Yeah.
and stuff like that?
They were
So-
actually like really good at taking the knight. Like in our test, they were like actually really good at taking the knight. It's just you get to like the last push of the Titan and they like wouldn't quite know what to do. So
Yeah.
we're just looking to resolve some of that stuff.
Cool. For the God Select lobby, we've got a few improvements there. The first God on PC is no longer going to be highlighted if you're playing on PC or with a mouse and keyboard. And then the View Abilities keybind in the lobby is going to be the same as the View Abilities keybind in-game, that control key. Just a better match and not be as confusing if you're in the lobby and you're trying to check the skills for a character that you want to select. For the loading screen, we added a color gradient to better show off what team is order versus chaos. We've also made some improvements to the death recap box. It's got better improvements to show how many hits of each damage source that you took, and then also it's got a little icon to show what dealt the killing blow to you as well.
Yeah, that's actually really handy because sometimes like you kind of assume it's got a certain thing on the list, but it might not always be because I think it's sorted by most damage.
Yes. And for the hit marker, we've updated the sound, got some feedback that will still kind of need a little bit of love. So I know the audio team worked on that, and that has been updated in the update. We've also got a new display treatment in the loadout screen to better show off skins with prisms. We'll show that off in a little bit. And then we've also added 2 new bots. Ra and Kepri are going to be in your co-op versus AI modes if you're playing those.
Nice.
For game modes, we've got Assault. We talked a little bit about it earlier last week, but we're just raising the amount of starting gold from 3,000 to 3,100 just to kind of prevent, like, there were lots of cases to where people were just hanging out in base and like, I'm just waiting for an extra 100 gold to pick up that tier 3 item plus my starter. So just making it a little bit easier for people to, get their build online and get to lane and have the jump party,
Yep.
For God balance, we covered a lot of this last week, Pon, so I'm not going to go into depth on each individual change, but basically the TLDR is a lot of aspects that were underperforming are seeing a little bit of love, and then lots of targeted hits to like the super high ban rated characters, right?
Yeah, they were either very high pick rate or very high ban rate.
Yeah.
Most of them were the very high ban rate side, and we tried to do pretty significant nerfs to those characters because they've just been there for a while, and we've hit them a few times. They're a lot more reasonable now, but they still are the most banned. We just want to shake up the meta a little bit more at the top level ranked especially. And then there's a few other like specific nerfs, like Scylla, for example, got a slight nerf to her crush. She was performing really well. She was also in basically every match.
Yep.
We think this is a light hit to a character who's largely doing well and won't really this isn't gonna ruin Scylla. Similar, we saw a few characters that after like the strength balance changes, they spiked up in a way that we wanted to were pretty significant jumps. So we just want to take the edge off that just preemptively before they become too much of a problem in the long run.
Cool. I will scroll through here. A couple things of note that I passed. Mercury receiving a buff.
Yeah.
Aspect Ganesha seeing a nerf. And as Pon said, a couple other characters that were performing really well after the strength pass. Pele getting a nerf. Princess Bari getting a nerf.
Yeah,
Kali
Pele,
getting a
Bari,
nerf.
Kali, Guan, Ganesh were largely Guan less so, but those 4 and Aladdin. Those were the big banned character ones.
Yep. And then last for balance, just one item on the list, Serrated Edge seeing a slight nerf. We'll probably be talking about Serrated Edge a little bit in the next update, based off of the teaser that we talked about last week. And then just one bug fix here. I think we've got some more that I'm going to be syncing with the team about, but just one for now. We fixed an issue where Sobek's Charge Prey Targeter was not displaying while the aspect was active.
Yeah, I know we have more bug fixes than that. It's just one of those things of getting the time to document it out to the patch notes is always a little bit weird to what ends up being in the patch versus what it goes in the next patch. We're always constantly fixing things, but not everything ever makes it to the bug.
Yeah, I think one thing that I saw earlier on today that wasn't in this note, there's an issue with Scylla with her Crush Detonate where the slow field would be invisible on the ground. That should be fixed in tomorrow's update. And there are a few other things too that will get added to the full notes on the website once I can confirm everything with the team. But that is pretty much everything for the Open Beta 14 update notes recap. I know that was really quick. We covered a lot of that stuff in depth in the last shows last week. So if you want to go back and watch the VODs and get a little bit more in-depth info on some of the balance, you can watch Friday's show. Pon was there with me last week.
Yep.
But I think the next thing that we want to do is let me get the handy dandy desktop prepped here. We want to show off the Emberlord Vulcan skin, and this is on the loadout page. So
this should be a lot more final than it was before, because I think the first time you guys showed it off, like, it was in the game and you could see some things, but like especially on the final form, I think the material was still messed up. And we didn't have a chance to like show off any of the VFX stuff.
Yeah.
So hopefully we have a lot more to show today.
So yep, this is the base form that you get immediately if you unlock the Saga Vault, and then on page 2 you've got Ashen Ascendant. The armor gets a little bit more kind of spiky. He's kind of following the flame a little bit more. He gets even more fiery with Pyreforged Tyrant, which is the 3rd form. But then the last form, which was kind of work in progress the last time we showed it, is Inferno Incarnate. And he just looks so sick. I'm really digging the mask with like the flame behind him and stuff like that.
And I think his backpack and turrets also like change.
Oh yeah, and you can even see he's got like some little movements and stuff on the shield.
Look at that. That's crazy. So cool.
That is
I think
nuts.
like each form has like a variant of that back piece too. Like, yeah, there's just a lot going on with the skin. It's really cool.
Yeah, this one is super sick. And then this is the final form. It also has some prisms that were a little bit work in progress that we wanted to show off. The first one is probably my favorite, the Chromaphere. I just love the magenta with like the blue and how it complements each other. It looks so sick, especially with like the gold hits on the armor and the weapon. This one is probably my favorite.
That's really cool.
Next up for prisms, we've got Sanguine. This kind of reminds me of the skin line that we have, where it's like the red and
King
white.
Arthur red white skin. Was it Morgan Fay also had one?
Yeah,
of those? Yeah.
Fenrir I think has one too.
Yeah.
Oh, dude, the back piece looks sick in this one.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
Next up for our green enjoyers, we've got Vera Dread. This one is giving me like Halloween vibes.
Yeah, very spooky.
And then last but not least, Glaciator.
Oh,
you got your winter night going on.
You're like ice fire.
Yeah, that's one sick. Is super sick. I love the blue flames, and like the back piece on this one is really cool too. The eyes are glowing too. Oh yeah, that's great. I am going to, let's go back to base Inferno Incarnate, and let's just go into a practice, and we'll show off some of the abilities and stuff.
Yeah.
Let's see.
There's one in particular I definitely am super excited to see, because I've been seeing it float around eternally.
Let's see here. I'll level up my abilities here. Actually, I'll reduce my cooldowns. Give me some mana. So, boost beads. There we go. The backfire's looking sick. And then your turret. So this is what the turret looks like. I'm going to refire it close to the totem because I know it's got a cool little projectile treatment here. It's like he's firing like a little mortar almost.
Yeah.
It's sick. And then you got the 3, the meatball. I don't know what it is. Like it's like a flaming spiky tire or something like that. It looks so sick.
That's cool.
Let me see if I can like.
Yeah, dude, that's like a. You do not want to get hit by.
Yeah. Well, speaking of things that you don't want to get hit by is the ult.
Hell yeah.
Dude, that mushroom cloud is insane.
That is actually really cool. Holy.
Dude, effects team went ham on this skin. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, that's incredible.
So, yep, this is the final form. Actually, let me get a mod and see if I can show off Thumper really quick. Dun, 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 dun. We'll get... Where is my dual mod?
I think it's going to be your first set.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have it.
Oh, I have it already. Cool. Oh, I just have consumables.
Yeah, so now you should be able to buy dual mod.
Yep.
There we go.
There we go. And there we go. There's Thumper.
Our good old Thumper.
This one looks sick.
I just like the theme of like the super spiky metal. Like this is just a theme that you can make like 100 skins of.
I know, right? I'm super looking forward to if we revisit this theme, like the kind of following the flame, like getting super hot, just like especially this ultimate. Even the effects on the ground, you get the sigil, the mushroom cloud lingers. It is super dope. So if you're interested in the Emberlord Vulcan, you can pick it up in the brand new Saga Vault that is going to be launching tomorrow's update. So
Nice.
That's super cool. And I think that was everything that I had on my agenda. Pon, is there anything that you want to talk about before we get into Q&A?
Is there anything that came up or that I'm remembering for 14 specifically? I don't think so. I think that's basically it. Lots of stuff going into the patch. Obviously, we'll have some cool balance for ranked. Sun Wukong is going to be really cool. And then, yeah, OB15 on the horizon.
Yes, I know Pon has got a laundry list of stuff for OB15 that he is working on.
Yeah.
So definitely, I still haven't figured out when we're going to be talking about that stuff, but let's get past Open Beta 14 first, make sure we've got that update in a good spot. And then we'll probably be back in a couple shows to talk about the 9 pages or so of things that Pon has been working on.
And that's only that change. We probably have other balance stuff that goes into that patch too.
For sure. Sweet. Well, again, chat, thanks so much for hanging out. We've got the update that goes live tomorrow. I think maintenance is going to start around 7 a.m. Eastern, but we're here chilling for the next 45 minutes or so. So if you have any questions about anything that's interesting that you want to talk about for Open Beta 14, any bug reports or any feedback that you got from the flash test, drop it in chat. We're hanging out and chilling with you all. So what do y'all want to talk about today?
Are we implementing aspect in lobby? I want to know what my teammates are playing. I think that's like on our list, like actively to do. I don't think it's 14, but I think it's like either like 15 or something. Like I know it's soon.
Yeah, I believe we've gotten a lot of feedback on it, so it's slowly crept up on the priority list. So.
Yeah, like I think around like the time of OB12, we basically like sat in a room and created this giant list of a whole bunch of UI things and like just general feels things that we wanted to kind of iterate through. So the last few patches we've been hitting a lot of those. It's just you have to prioritize that list, and I know that like that's one of the ones I know was talked about recently.
Yeah.
I don't know any of the sale stuff relating to the saga. I don't know if you know.
Yeah, I am not sure. I don't know if the prices are final yet.
Can you show us the recall skin?
Ooh, I closed the client, but let me see if I can boot that up and shut off because it's the first one's in SMITE 2.
Do you feel like any build paths are too similar to SMITE 1? Like mages feel like all their good items are basically just SMITE 1 ported with small changes. I was chatting with Clumsy about this, especially like the amount of items we actually have in SMITE 2 is fairly large at this point, but there are definitely some items that have overlaps in ways that like we could actually probably like spread them out a little bit more. And even if we brought port stuff over, it'd be cool to change them in certain ways to like make them more interesting or more engaging. There's probably a few items we could go back and look at and especially try and make more interesting and engaging just in general. I feel like there's definitely places for new items to come into a lot of builds. But like we also did have like 12 years of optimizing certain types of items for a very specific type of role and very specific function. It's not surprising that a lot of them end up still working out really well. So I don't think we'd change them just for the sake of changing them. But if there are things that are being underutilized or aren't quite working out in SMITE 2, we can look at just reinvestigating them. It does mean that some items might go away and get replaced rather than just continuing to add, because there's a certain amount of like items where it's like too much, but we have a little bit of room before I think that becomes too big of a problem.
All right, give me like 2 seconds and I can...
A little bit less item installation 2.0, more like a... Because the item installation pass was very much a... Items should generally be bought for like their passive or what they bring rather than just the generically good stats. There's certain items where you can't quite do that, but in general, like you wanted to feel like the item choice had an impact versus just you got the amount of stats that you needed. This is more about like making sure that depending on the type of player you are, the way that you want to play the game is presented.
Yeah. All right, let me bring up the client again. So this is the recall skin. So, and I believe that is the base version, and then that version is also going to have different colors that kind of match all the different prisms that are available for the skin as well.
Nice. That's cool.
I love the textures, like whatever those runes are on the end that are kind of like floating up in space, and then kind of like dissipate in flame. That's super sick.
What about ability-based hybrid scaling items? That's probably a niche that could be better served. One issue you kind of run into that is depending on how certain characters have been set up in the past. Like if you scale both off strength and int, those items have to basically be only good for those types of characters, because if you give enough strength for it to be good on just a physical assassin, for example, it's almost certainly busted on the character that's a hybrid character. So that's just an area where we probably need better itemization overall. I think also you can somewhat use the executioner tech, where it gives you highest based off what your currently highest priority is. That way you can splash it into pretty much any build that you want, and it'll largely work to what the main stat you're going towards. I think that's another way to kind of make sure the items are accessible to the hybrid characters.
When See True asks, sagas will be something like 1 or 4 a year. I don't think we've necessarily determined how often we're going to do these. This is the first saga that we've ever done, so I'm sure that the team is going to be, taking a look at how it performs and then kind of make a decision on, if we want to continue doing them in the future based off of how this first one does. I know sagas are similar to collections to where like they are going to last in the watering market, forever. So if you pick one up, it's not going to go away. You've got, all the time in the world that you want to complete it. But maybe in the future, for sure, we could definitely look at doing more sagas.
Someone would have. Oh yeah, is it intentional for leaps to reset tower aggro? I don't believe it is. I believe I saw a fix submitted for that. I think it's for 15.
Yeah,
because that's a risky change for 14 because it interacts with AI logic. It's always a little bit risky. So we are looking to resolve that. I think I found a bug with it at this point. I need to go talk to Matt about, but. Can you explain what makes one ability more buggy than another? Example being Mercs 3. So largely it has to do with there's two types of ways abilities can be buggy. It's either the underlying tech or it's like how complicated the state of it is. So for example, Aladdin ults, very complicated ability. You have basically a whole manager dedicated to just determining if a fight's on or not, who the combatants are, how people leave, keeping track of when people leave, throwing them back to the right location. Like there's a lot of things that can go wrong. Where like if one path down all the branching paths of things that can happen, one path might actually have an issue where something was misconfigured or made an assumption that wasn't a safe assumption. So that's one way abilities can be buggy. Another way is if there's underlying systems that rely on, like, for example, movement is a system that relies on a lot of server correction movement. We have client authoritative dashes. We have a lot of things to try and make sure that dashes feel responsive. But that can cause issues with, well, what if my client sees that I hit and the server doesn't see I hit in this situation? And we want to keep it as responsive for the player as possible, where if you hit someone, you don't want to wait for the server to come up and down to tell you hit a person. That's why, like, generally, like when you left click, we let you swing immediately, and you might, depending on your latency, see the hit VFX be a little bit later. If you had to wait to the server to authoritate that left click swing before you saw it, the game would feel very unresponsive. But that comes at a cost of, well, what happens when the server and the client don't agree on this? And what happens when you've made part of it client authoritative, but then the other part isn't? So that's why you see issues with like Achilles dash as well. It's also why we looked at like the movement system as a whole. That kind of part of the game can have issues that like have some underlying things about it that make it so that when you try and like optimize it for feels, it can have a break case, and decisions you've made in the past can often muddy that a little bit more. So speaking on that a little bit, I know I looked at Achilles execute because in the same ballpark of that, maybe have something for 15, but I need to playtest it more and see if it's good to go, because trying to get that in could introduce more problems than not. As you can see, like, I don't want to necessarily ship something that might help the problem if it's not going to be guaranteed, and actually testing it and seeing all the different cases that happen can be difficult. But that's kind of why abilities can be more difficult. You either have like the tons of branching ifs that can happen and making sure you got them all right, or there's underlying tech that has some assumptions that were made to like solve one specific problem that can then make another aspect of it a little bit more difficult or cause more problems. So it's a hard problem to fix too, which is the unfortunate thing about it.
Any update on Darkheart Zeus? I know y'all were looking into it. I do, in fact, have an update on Darkheart Zeus. You heard it here first, chat. Darkheart Zeus, starting tomorrow, is actually going to be available as a Twitch drop. So if you're watching some streams, we're having Darkheart Zeus kind of strike his way into our weekly Twitch drops campaign. So if you're watching, not only Smite game, but anybody else in the category, I believe he's going to be in the Open Beta 14 Week 1 campaign. So it'll last from tomorrow all the way up until next Tuesday. And you can pick up that skin via a Twitch drop.
Thoughts on buffing Mirrodin? I saw that question asked a few times. How do I want it? So there's, if Mirrodin is a meta where it's good enough to go into every build, it probably is busted and makes the game not super fun. But it's like one of those items that has like a very narrow band of like acceptability, because again, like if everyone can just fling double abilities all the time and every fight gets resolved by everyone throwing double abilities, that becomes a problem. So it's an active effect that needs to have high impact in the moment it is, but it needs to not generally be that good outside of that, and it needs to have a long cooldown on it. So where it is right now, where people can flex it in for fun and there's a few characters who can use it really, really well, that's probably close to the right balance point. Like, it's maybe a few seconds cooldown difference, or maybe a little bit more power, a little bit cost adjustment down if it needs to be buffed at all. It's not something where we'd be like half the cooldown or make it have significantly more int. And you can actually see that with like another item that I know people have been talking about recently with Jade Scepter. That was an item that was generally underperforming. We gave it quite a bit of love to buff it up a lot, and now that's being used more frequently. It's actually, there's a certain amount of frustration that having that item being too frequent causes. It probably needs to be a bit more niche. It needs to be more like, I think the way that Ganesh uses it, even if you were to half the intelligence on it, the way Ganesh uses it is really strong. And so
because he Scepter, ult, charge,
and you charge and lock someone in it, right? Like that's a case where like that character uses it really, really well. It should probably be bounced more to the case of that character than being so generically good that basically anyone could flex it, right? So like you want to be careful. That's a lot of active items fall into that bucket, because by definition your active is something you can only use every so often. So it needs to have high impact when it happens, but if it's too good outside those cases where the impact is too high, it can cause problems.
Let's see. How is Odin doing? Is he on the list to get a +1 at some point?
So as far as like general balance, he does pretty well. I know that people have given feedback about like his moving to Smite 2, and also a lot of people have different interpretations of what they want Odin to do and what Odin to be. He is a character that we could look and do stuff with in the future. There just aren't currently any immediate plans. As far as balance goes, he generally fills his niche pretty well. He forces basically a whole bunch of phantoms if he's in the match, right? That's already pretty strong in its own right. And when you don't have that, there's a lot of combos that you can do. He's generally bruisery. He can put out a lot of pressure. He can bring CC. Like, he does well, but whether people like playing him is like a different side of the coin. And we've looked at ways to improve it. It's just there isn't an easy, clear path forward with him, and so we have a lot of other stuff to be tackling instead.
Do either of you know if the concept of a rematch button has been further explored? So I'm guessing like if you're playing a ranked game and you either win or you lose and you want the salty run back and you just hit rematch. I don't know. It's an interesting idea.
I've seen it done in a few other games, and the thing that generally happens with it is two people or even like one person just says no. And then you're done. Because everyone would have to opt into it, right? And that's tough when you've got 10 individual people, Would I like to apologize for demolishing Friends in Arena a while back? Probably not.
Probably not. Could be cool in Duel.
Yeah, I think Duel is probably like the one place where that would work. Even Joust,
because it's like fighting games, right?
Like that's the 1v1 case is probably like really good. That would actually really like that just gets like, I'm wondering like what if like Duel was to like first tower, first blood. I know that would change the meta a ton.
It's like Gentleman's Joust,
but it's like a quick play version of that where like you just have like a really like intense like 1v1 situation for a little bit, and then you can just rematch and go again and go again, and you can go again until people don't want to. Probably would have to be its own separate thing because there's a lot of other things that go on in Duel, but I think it's also like, especially when you have like a longer match, that also means that like the times that you want to rematch are probably less. versus like in a fighting game, right? Like you have like maybe 3 minutes if you fight the other person, and then you do the run back.
Yeah.
You can do that like 5 or 6 times.
Oh
that
yeah,
could be
for
your,
sure.
Like, play
Yeah,
session, but
you
like
can just run a full set. best 3 out of 5.
But if you just play in a 20-minute duel, and you're like, am I gonna sign up, right? Like a lot of people like they can only play in bursts. So like I think you also get some amount of people saying just no to rematches because of that. But I think it could still work in duel.
I saw a good one and I missed it. Since the addition of Nuwa's aspect, would a magic version of Nemean be created, or maybe a Thorn's relic?
We do that occasionally, depending on like how niche the thing that we want to try and counter is. Nemean is probably like I'm trying to figure out. Not every single type of thing needs all the same amount of counters and answers. There's a certain amount of like you want where I buy Nemean, it gives me a lot of physical protection. It's going to be good against physical damage, and it reflects damage. And that reflect I can take regardless of whether I need the physical or not. So in the cases where I'm against a magical character, it's not as good.
Yeah.
And that counter is less visible. It's like less. It's not as good of a counter against magical. And there's some amount of texture where if you always have the same exact tools for all the same situations, you're just picking. You just have to like know, okay, this game I'm against a magical character, so I get this version of the item instead. It's good to have some texture, and like there are certain things that don't have as strong of counters as others. So not everything gets the same level counter. Crit was one where like that's narrow enough of a thing that you probably do want to have some general universal answer to, at least it be more comparable. But I think like Nemean specifically as like a counter to a physical in hand and being generally good at also reflecting damage is probably a better place. We go back and forth about whether or not like certain things need global counters or not. But just having duplicates generally just leads to a lot of redundant items. And it also means that there's a lot less texture in the character draft stage, right? Like if there's no difference between a Soul and Apollo because you can just build the same exact things against them, just they have different names. The draft also becomes less interesting. Like, it's tough. That's like one of it feels like the obvious answer is give the counter to everything because I want to be able to counter it, but like, and like now they have to respond to the counter and you do all that game. But like, there's a certain point where that needs to end, and there's a certain point where there's too much of that can just lead to redundancy.
We saw protection scaling on tanks during the alpha, but we haven't seen them since. Why is that, and will we see protection scalings return?
Yeah, it's interesting because it was an aspect we wanted to try, and I think generally when we tried on a few characters, it was interesting, but they were generally building the same way they were doing before, so it was just kind of plus one-ing them. It probably works better in more specific cases. It's just I think it's a tool that like it didn't work super well the way we tried it. It does the job, but it's not like it wasn't like, man, this is like a really cool thing to be doing on every character. Same thing with like int scaling, right? Like int scaling I think is best when it does something like Sun Wukong, where it's really kind of it's giving you more to play with than just like here's a slightly different scaling number for a thing that you were probably already going to build. And Prots is one of those things that's like it's harder to make a clear build path between that. Like strength and int I think you can do more with. Doesn't mean we could probably use it more, probably. There's probably a few cases where you could use it and just we haven't. Can other starter items get power based off which you have more, like the jungle ones? Similar answer to before, where it's like it's good to have some variety to where like if every character can build Conduit Gem versus Bluestone versus Warrior's Act with no trade-off, one, it makes it more likely that one just ends up dominating all the rest of them. But two, it also means that there's less difference in drafting. Like I think it's interesting that like some major, like I think it was Aspect Merlin actually can go Bluestone at the start, and it's pretty good, even though it's strength, because you get a little bit of extra pressure with your basic attacks in the laning phase, but you also just have abilities to proc, and you get a lot of pressure that way. That's interesting.
Yeah, especially if you get like a good roll or at the beginning of the game, and you've got two abilities at level 1.
If Bluestone just also gives int, you lose some of that texture, right? Like so again, it's you pick that where you want it to be. Making it a universal thing kind of removes the unique aspect of it and the theory crafting behind it and the different situations that can arise. Jungle is just a unique case because jungle is like such a very specific role, and you need like unlike a lot of the other starters, like you can kind of go any other starter in any other lane, like to a point, right? Like you probably want, like if you really need the wave clear, you probably want Bluestone over Warrior's Axe. But we also saw like there are a few cases where the carries were going Warrior's Axe for high pressure in their lane, right? Like, but you need Bumbas.
Yeah.
And if we were to make it into the strength version of it, we'd just be basically creating redundant items. So that's a case where it's like, instead of creating redundant items, let's just give you both.
Yep. Here's a fun one for Monday. Pon, what's your favorite Smite item of all time? Either game from any patch.
Yeah, I saw that question. I was trying to think of it. My favorite. So, ooh, this is gonna be controversial, I think. So I think the first one is just Staff of Mirrodin, because that was a item that, because I did a lot of the Arthurian items, the first pass of them, the ultimate trigger things. And that was like a cool space to explore, and Mirrodin was like the most wow effect to come out of that, where it's like, oh man, that's a really crazy thing to try. So I like that one for that reason. But old Heartseeker, the one where you'd stack it up, and then when you died, you lost, like, I think it was either all or half. I like, so again, I'm a Thanatos Kali enjoyer. I like going to like no health and playing super risky and getting the high payoffs of stuff. So that item I think worked really well for me. There's not really anything that's super comparable to that, because it also that item has a lot of downsides in the sense of like, yeah, you buy this, you're now playing the super high risk, high reward game, and if you fail that, well, your team in a team-based game is now going to be really, really behind because you're just significantly weak. I think there's room for some of those effects, but like that's why it was removed.
For me, I just like way back in the day, Smite 1, where we introduced the masks. Like, I just love the idea of, having a trade-off that you have to build around. It was
cool. The masks are fun. It was Rangda's mask Hercules. Was like my go-to.
I had a really fun, I don't know why I came up with, but it was a low-nose mask Thanatos build. I was like, I don't need to do damage. Just let my team do damage, and I'll execute, and I'll just be super tanky getting in there.
There was a while when I was playing Smite 1 where there was like a player who would show up in my games pretty regularly, and he was a tank Loki. And he was really effective because they'd see Loki, and everyone would turn, like, kill the Loki. Yeah. And he was just tanky, and everyone was just wasting their time because he wasn't doing anything in the fights. But they would just turn on him and fight him, and I had to, like, tell people, this guy's going to go tank Loki. just ignore him.
That's funny.
We get on activation items like Shield of Regrowth, Fabulous Troops. Yeah, you will probably have more of that sooner than you think.
Yeah.
That's all I'll say on that. But I do think there's one thing that we want to do is, so one thing that's cool about UE5 is we can tag things. So I'm not saying we're doing this, but like, for example, you could tag all of the fire god abilities as ability .type.fire, right? And you could say fire abilities do X.
That's cool.
Or when you use a fire ability, do X. We have a ton of things we do before fire, but like, like for example, like melee versus ranged, projectile, heal, like you have a whole bunch of these things that we could be like, we just have to go through and do the work to tag them, which is an amount of work. But then once you have them all tagged and you maintain that tagging going forward, you can do a lot of really cool item effects that way. And that's probably an area that I want to explore more. It's just finding the time to go tag everything takes a little bit of time.
Yeah, that's a super cool idea. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah. And it gives you a lot of like variety. Although you start to get into the question of what counts as a melee ability versus range ability, you'll be surprised how once you have enough abilities, those questions that seem like they're obvious aren't as obvious. But are there any items that buff ally prots in the works? You can buff every stack except prot for your team. So that was very intentional. One thing we didn't want to bring over from Smite 1 was that your support was basically an Orbot, and specifically it was an Orbot that made everyone tankier. And so team fights in the late game were kind of bounced around the idea that like you kind of just knew you had like an extra 50 prots plus like 10% mitigations that you were just bringing to everyone. And if your support didn't do that, right, you were like really, really disadvantaged. So we didn't want to make it so that the support player felt obligated to bring these kind of prot effects. And we wanted to give them more interesting, more unique things to bring. If we bring items that give prots, they probably need to be more in a conditional sense, or they need to come at a trade-off so that they're not just the default go-to thing, because making your whole team tankier is just really, really good.
Are we aware that Merc's max crit tracker is broken? No,
I'm
I am not
not.
aware. Coach, is it just not showing any number at all? Or give me a little bit more info on what that issue is. That way I can pass it to the team.
To the extent items like Jet Emperor's Helm, which reduces enemy power, to a point, yeah. Again, some of that is reducing enemy power globally versus reducing it on like a single person or a single case. Yeah, it's similar. We didn't have as many of those, and generally those weren't nearly as strong. Like I think like a lot of them are like remove like 15 power versus like give someone 15 strength or prots. Generally giving someone 15 prots is a lot better. But and those characters could generally afford more to sacrifice those like offensive stats to be able to bring those orders to the team.
See someone saying that tracker stays at 0. I will take a note and have the team look at it, because I know you mercs out there are critting people. So
yeah. Pressing a dash button while taunted crit bolt fires the dash automatically when the CC finishes. That should be. Is that every dash or is that a specific dash? If you have a case where that's happening, I can go try and repro that, because some dashes I could see working that way, but generally it should cancel the dash and not go off.
Do you think there should be more strength and int items?
I think that there's room for more of the executioner style effect generally. And I think that there's room for a specific few hybrid items. So the difference being, and I mentioned this a bit earlier, is an item giving you the highest that you have means that the item is now buildable by people who want int or strength or both. And that I think is just good to open up in a few cases where it makes sense. Hybrid items need to be more specifically for hybrid characters and interact with the fact that they're hybrid a bit more directly. Because if you give an item like enough strength and int for it to be good on a hybrid character, it's basically going to be trash on like a pure strength or pure int character. And it kind of has to be balanced that way. So it needs to have reasons for you to want it as a hybrid character. And that's just a niche that we haven't really fleshed out as much as we probably could be. So it'd be interesting to look at, like, that'd be like 1 or 2 new items could fit that space, I think. Yeah, building gods could use a Braggy equivalent. Like, yeah, Braggy is a good example. Like, I think we've gotten that item to a point where you're not just artificially picking that up on everyone, or like if you are, you're generally picking it up on the on-hit characters who you also utilize a little bit of int in their build. I think that's a good example of a hybrid item that works well. But it didn't take much for it to be used on everyone regardless, right? So that's a case we have to be careful of.
Will there ever be changes on the aspects that are already here? Balance changes, surely, and we've got a lot of them in Open Beta 14, but I am assuming that you're thinking about probably larger, more rework level territories on aspects.
Yeah. So obviously balance changes, yes. In some cases, we can do a lot with the balance changes to feel really cool. Like, I think the Kernidos one coming out is going to be really interesting, where now your seasons are stronger, so that's an aspect that you have to play more with. And it also means that your 3 applies them. So when you dash to an enemy team, you like, do I want to AoE slow everyone? Do I want to apply like more damage? Do I want to shut all their prots off? Like, that's a balance change that I think that pretty drastically affects how you want to play.
It adds another level of thinking whenever you're going.
For some that are like that we would say it just haven't worked out. Like, I think Loki is the example I'd bring up here. We'd be interested in more like a version of it that doesn't have anything to do with what it currently does could be on the table, or it would have to be really fleshed out more, I think, in giving more gameplay to it than what's currently there. So we're not against it, but it being there and letting people meme around with it if they want to doesn't really hurt anyone. So we don't have as much, like, do we circle back and fix that when we have an idea that we really like, which is the other part of the problem? Or do we try and flesh out a few more characters that still are missing some that we have a good idea for? That's also the thing that we're weighing. How does the team feel about making a character that does buffing, debuffing? So I do have feelings about this one. You have to make that character would largely be about making the fact that you're applying buffs and debuffs feel good. It's really easy to make a character that's effective with that kind of playstyle, but I guarantee you that every player would think that character's weak and really, really underperforming, and it'd have like a 60% win rate. The reason I know this is because we had that.
Yes.
If you remember Nike was a character that had a passive that was like, that basically buffed
Real
the whole
good,
team.
yeah.
And it was a passive buff that buffed the whole team, but like that character had a 60% win rate, which is really, really high. Her being on your team was actually guiding you to victory. She was living up to her name. But everyone's like, this character feels underwhelming. And it's because you don't feel the application of that buff to your team. So you'd have to make sure that the buffs and debuffs feel really good in a meaningful way. There's things that you can do to make that better, right? Like you could have text pop up when you buff people, or like, let's say you put like a strong trigger that when it triggers, it does a big flash of light. Like you'd have to go through a lot of the motions. That character would just be a very large amount of work in like that department to make that work. And then you have a character that is utility to the team, could be fun, but you'd have to, whether it's fun versus what you'd have to do to make that character feel good for the player is like, I think there's a lot of work there that I think is it would take a lot of time to get right. Which god caused the least headaches when it came to balancing in SMITE 1? It would have to be either Thanatos or Agni. I think
because I know for a long time Agni was just like, all right, here's our kind of base point for how our character's performing in SMITE 1 for a long time.
Yeah.
Was Agni.
Yeah, those characters just generally didn't need many adjustments for their long cycle of like being in SMITE. They had a few changes that happened early on, but like they just largely chilled for a really long time. Which is weird because I wouldn't expect those characters to necessarily be the example case, because Agni can basically instant stun you from range, and Thanatos is like the super hyper aggressive carry that can just constantly reset and get pentakills in fights. But they somehow ended up being those cases that just didn't give us that many problems. He didn't get any patch for like 6 years. Yeah, it was a really. I remember we put him on a buff list once, and we went and like looked at like what we'd done previously to him to see like, what was like the last thing we changed that since the character, and we had to like actually go back a really long time.
You're like, wait, what? This can't be right.
Do you think quick play as is would be better as an experimental mode rather than the new player experience? No, because I actually think it does. So this is my personal take. I think it actually does a really good job for the new player experience, in regards to getting players into the match, feeling like they're doing cool stuff, and learning the base controls of SMITE. Right, like it does a really good job of that stuff because you're in a relatively low stake situation. You're learning items without having to learn the whole item building system behind it. So you could start to be familiar with things that once you get out of that mode, you kind of understand. You're constantly fighting people, and there's low stakes starts dying, so you can come back and keep fighting. So you can get to see more abilities, learn more about your kit. I think it actually does a really good job at that. It probably doesn't do as good of a job at teaching you the MOBA, like how to lane. Which I know that's why a lot of the reason we wanted to get quick play Joust out there is to see how that does as well. But as far as like how new players engage with the game, I think it works really, really well. If it was its own experimental thing, I think people would enjoy it. But I think it's better that people are trying this as their introduction to SMITE, and it seems to be like it's actually doing pretty well there. Now we could probably do more to make that experience better, and I think also like Joust will be an interesting one to see how that does, because that is a much different type of introduction to SMITE. So we'll see. Why did you move down to 3 damage reduction? I'd have to go look and look at the specifics of it. I just don't know off the top of my head. Can we get an active item that has to be charged up to use their powerful effect before being charged again? I've wanted to do that type of item more directly. We just haven't found a good time to do it and a good effect for it to work off of. But I do think there's a cool idea of like, you buy an active item and you have to do something first before you can utilize it, or you have to like play a mini game loop to get it more frequently or something like that. I think that's a cool space that we just haven't really done much of. We have one, is it Runeforged? Runeforged, I think it's not an active effect, but it has like you apply CC to mark them, and then I think as you apply more CC, it reduces that cooldown if it's there. That's kind of in that ballpark, but it's like the light version of that concept. Loki buff when? Loki got nerfed, unfortunately. He's doing pretty well.
Sorry.
Not a crazy nerf, but a little bit.
Let's see.
And I plan to nerf Dance's aspect ability.
I was going to bring this up. I saw another Reddit thread about Dance this morning.
That seems to be like the newest kind of strong split push one. I'd have to look at it more and see how that aspect's doing overall. If it's a little bit too strong, we can look at nerfing it. Yeah. But I mentioned it on Friday. A lot of it is like split pushing should be somewhat of a viable strategy. It's important for it to exist because it also helps break stalls. Mm-hmm. If it's too easy to execute or too dominant, then it's a problem. Yeah. We should address it. But like split pushing in itself isn't inherently bad. It's just if it's too frequent and too easy, which maybe people are finding that this is too frequent and too easy, and we can look at it more directly. New iCloud terms and conditions. Not now.
Yeah. What are the team's thoughts on the firebrand? So this is the two little imps in the fire giant pit.
I think it's an interesting objective. It encourages the jungler to go to the soul laner. It also gives the soul laner something else to do. Probably a little, for the amount of effort it takes to get them, probably a little bit too high. Mm-hmm. So they sometimes get ignored. Could be maybe a little bit easier to do or more frequent or something more for the soul laner to take care of. But like, I think they largely add some interest and a little bit of depth to the early laning phase, which is largely what they're there for. Maybe it's like a different balance point for them that could make them a bit more interesting, but I think they largely do what they need to do. Worst ability idea I've ever come up with that didn't make it into the game. Baron's original ultimate.
I remember that.
Yeah. So the original ult was
swag surf with the coffin.
Yeah, he would surf on the coffin, and then that was cool. I stand by that. That was cool. But then he'd hit you and he'd jump into you and he'd possess you. And possess, if you could just directly control a character, that's OP. That's wildly strong. Like being able to like literally be like, nope, you are coming to my enemy to the back line and they're gonna get shredded. You're gonna walk in the tower. Very, very strong. So we tried to do something clever with that, where it was like they can manipulate your movement, and so the idea was you had abilities that could like push and move you around, and they were skill shots for you to dodge. It was impossible to aim as the Baron to actually do this. It wasn't fun for the person being possessed. It was just very chaotic. Didn't feel effective for both characters, and like that whole loop didn't work, and so we ended up moving more to like, I think his current version is like actually just really cool. Like,
it's iconic now.
Yeah, it's iconic now. But the first version of that possession, it was one of those things where like we had like two different pitches for how the possession could work, and we rapidly iterated through both of them and went, actually both of these aren't great. Yeah. And so at that point you have to decide, do I come up with a third version or do I have to come up with some just new direction for him? And so at that point you just go, new direction. We swung out twice. Let's try something different. Can y'all make Cupid with Arrows bow target two people instead of one? It's interesting to
I like the flavor, you know?
So we talked about this a lot even in SMITE 1 because we had Chronos Pendant. And we liked that Chronos Pendant was good on Chronos. He was a character that did really well with cooldown reduction. It felt like you could build on him and be really effective. If you Book of Thoth felt good on Thoth, right? Like if those characters felt bad using that item, that's kind of a flavor fail that doesn't feel great. Aerospell working well on Cupid feels great. But you could say this item is stronger when held by Cupid, or this item is stronger when held by Chronos, or stronger when held by Thoth. And it sounds interesting, but it also just means that character's default is probably going to be you always have to build that item. Yeah,
it's just one less item slot for you. You've got to build that.
So that's kind of why we haven't done it in the past. It started to feel mandatory, which, I mean, it's cool flavor. I like it, but like it also like that's like it's one of those things that's like it's cool for like a week or two, and then you're like, oh, every time I play this character from now I'm gonna be building this. It's not cool for the year-long run. Yeah. Bastet in SMITE 2 when?
Eventually.
Do you think she needs a more cat-oriented remodel? I probably will. Again, when it comes to art, I have very limited input on like.
You gotta get Ben back on the show. I tried to get Ben on today, but he's super busy. But
like when it comes to like especially like new characters, like there's some things I can push for. Like on Tsukiyomi, I really wanted the Twin Tonfa, so like the idea for that, like pushing in that direction, but like how they actually ended up looking and like a lot of his model stuff, like that's determined by the art team, and I give feedback on. So I don't have full control of the art. I will say the idea of having like the Cats musical type cat, and I know that that's a matter of like executing it well. but like I'll see other like cat characters that are like that in other games, and they all give me kind of the same vibe. So the fact that like I don't have a great example to look at makes me think that's a really hard thing to do really, really well. That's my own personal take. If we could execute on that theme really well, sure, why not? But I think it's generally like I think that's the reason why you see a lot of like the cat characters going more the direction we have with Boston. I believe we have heard of Kamali. Like I know like we've talked about a shark type character a lot. It'd just be cool to do. And I believe that's one of like there's a few other characters that could fall under, but I think we've had them on like mood boards before.
I'm sure they're probably on Kilgoon's just like never ending Google slide doc of
we do have like an internal doc of like a ton of characters because like we've also opened that up to like internal pitches too where like people are like, what are the characters that you wanted to see, and like they'll come back with like 8 characters with their own mood board. So we have like we probably have a slide for like any character you could probably pitch that is reasonable to make it into the game, and some that are unreasonable to make it into the game.
For sure.
How do one acquire a SMITE figure like the one behind me?
I think those are out of. I think they're out of stock. Those are some old.
Yeah, those are old prints.
Yeah.
I think I still have one actually boxed.
Oh man, you got the limited editions.
It's the weird one I have. Is there a Dracula slide? Yeah, there is. I think there's also a is it Paul Bunyan in the blue box?
Yep. A lot of the old American folklore. Yeah.
Again, we've opened up to also internal pitches, and we look through a lot of things. Like, we probably have a slide for a character.
Yep. Any considerations to making towers stronger early game? It seems far too easy for certain comps or characters to just dive and kill you with little to no risk.
Yes, we could consider buffing them. I'd be more interested in a more robust system that like kind of targets that specific problem. Because I'll stake my claim here. It is your job to protect the tower. It's not the tower's job to protect you. It's there to assist you. It's there to give you some cover. But if someone can super freely dive you and kill you, and the tower, like, it's very rare that the tower is going to not meaningfully contributed, you are probably out of position. Now, it could be stronger. It might become too ineffective, especially the tier 1 tower, because the tier 1 tower is weaker than the rest.
Yeah.
It could become too ineffective too early. Like, that's possible. But I'd be more interested in something that prevents you from just sitting under tower, because that's the other problem. That, like, I'd rather the towers be too weak than them be too strong and the game just stalls forever. Right? Like, if you can just passively sit at your tower and not feel like you're losing much, and the other person doesn't really have an answer because they can't really dive you to pressure you out, that's probably its own problem. So something along the lines of, like, the first time someone tries to dive you, if you've been pushing back and fighting, the tower's actually better at protecting you. But then if you've been doing this frequently, if they've been chipping away at you under the tower, and like you haven't been leaving to fight them and you've relying on the tower, at that point the tower is going to be less effective. Like, I'd be interested in a solution like that rather than just buffing the tower, because it's really easy to make the tower just too good at that point. So like, if I had to pick like a balance side to fall on, it'd be the towers need to be more defended by you than providing you too much protection. And I'd rather to create something more interesting to give, like, the specific problem of, like, this is the first time they dove me. I was largely full health. They were able to dive me under tower, and the tower only took, like, a third of their health away. And we used our abilities. Like, one, I think that situation is actually pretty rare. Like, did you miss everything, I guess? Because, like, I feel like if they can get away with that, like, that's probably like, they probably had a reason they could essentially outplay at that point. But, like, that specific subset of problem, I think, could be resolved in more interesting ways than just buffing the tower.
I see several people asking about Zeus. I see asking about the Smite 1 kid. I've seen buffs for Zeus. Lots of stuff about Zeus. So how are you feeling about Zeus?
I think he's largely doing well. He generally gets pretty good pick rate. He does well on what he wants to do. He can flex between mid and carry. We see him be successful in both. I think his new kit is generally healthier for the game than the old kit. That's why we made the change originally. Was the shield style play really made it so it was really difficult to ever approach Zeus, and that limited his balance too, because essentially all of his power had to be locked behind that, because he can't be good outside that situation because he just brings so much to the team. I think his current kit's you have a lot more capability of doing interesting things with him now. We have talked about the aspect maybe bringing that shield back. It's one thing we try to avoid on aspects though is like totally different kit functionality that requires totally different VFX, especially for VFX that we haven't supported anymore. And there's also a good amount of people who also don't want to see that playstyle come back. There's again a reason we changed it. He's probably in a pretty good spot. If the aspect brought the shield back, I don't think it'd bring it back in exactly the same way, because that playstyle had its own problems. Is the reason we changed it in the first place. So he's not super on our list for buffs. We have some aspect confusion on him that we need to resolve before we make him an aspect for him. And that's probably where we sit with him. I don't have too much more to say than that.
Cool. Well, we are at 2 p.m.
Wow,
so
it's already
time
2?
for, I know, right? Time flies when you're having fun, man. It's time for one more question. And then we'll get ready for Open Beta 14 that goes live tomorrow.
There's 2 questions that I think are interesting.
Cool.
So have you changed your mind on not reworking Port of Gods to Smite 2? I don't know if we've made super strong statements about this before. It's generally, when we bring over gods, we want to generally respect their Smite 1 kits. But we also know there's a few characters that when we bring over, they have problems that we'd want to resolve, or their kits are intrinsically a bit more divisive. So like Zeus is a good example when we change a little bit, right? To because we think that there's a problematic thing. And he was very early on, like when we were still trying to define what it even meant to bring over a god, right? He's actually probably more significant than we would have done with our current thought process on it. Because I don't think he was as divisive as someone like, when we get to Persephone, I'll just use her as an example. When we get to Persephone, it's unlikely we just take the current kit that's there in Smite 1 and just bring it over, right? Almost certainly the path is going to be different. There's a whole bunch of things about the original kit that people liked that we might take pieces of and bring back. And maybe we go, actually, this character has room to do something new and interesting. And because she has a contentious past, like, we might be able to do something just completely different here. It's probably going to be more of the first option, which is take bits and pieces and then refine what's there. So it feels like Persephone, just within, like, there's some new things to play with and some different pieces of what was there before, rather than here's a completely new character now called Persephone. But we could do that. And it's going to be reserved for those very contentious characters. Like Freya is another character that like Freya is an interesting character because just her rework history. She'd be another character like if there were characters we kind of break on the just straight up porting and then trying to find ways to refine them, it would be those types of characters. And when we get to them, we'll figure out what that looks like.
Yeah. All right. Let's see if I can choose a good question before we close out the show. I'm going to choose this one just because I know we've talked a little bit about it on the last show, just about Conquest. And like, I know you all are thinking about Conquest and just like overall objective play, but just like the possibility of maybe bringing back some of that old stuff from Smite 1, especially some of the things that players love from Season 11, like the Tiki and the Bastions.
That was actually the second question.
Cool, nice.
So yes, we're interested in bringing that kind of stuff over. Again, Smite 1 had a very long history of trying to resolve problems that like popped up over its long lifespan. These problems are going to be similar to problems that we have today in Smite 2 because we are a MOBA. There's a lot of things that are very similar. We've changed a lot, but there's still core things about how players want to interact with the map. And there are things that we've done that have been successful and things we have done that have been unsuccessful. I think we want to try and do new things where possible. And even when we do take stuff from the like older map, we want to try and bring them in a way that's fresh and interesting versus just direct one-to-one, especially when it comes to like the Conquest map where those changes, especially right now, are going to probably be a little bit more long-lived than they might have been in previous seasons. So just when we bring them over, we want to be sure they're in a really good state, because they will be able to iterate on them. But like, if it doesn't work out, the odds of being able to completely rip it out and give you something new sooner rather than later, we're going to be slower in that regards in that way, right? So when we bring it over, we want to have high confidence in it. So there's things we could look at the season 11 map and bring over. I think like the Tikis are ones that come up commonly. The center beacon is the other one that comes up really commonly. There've been like some other side things that have come up and like people have discussed, like remember the stealth fields that were there for a little bit? The grass largely covers that, but maybe there's some more interesting things we can do with that, because that was a whole dynamic system that basically created dynamic bush areas, right? So like that kind of stuff could be interesting to bring over. I know someone was asking earlier about like green buff, like having a buff that feels more dedicated to the support role. There are things that we can look at and bring over. I just think we want to try and do new stuff when it comes to the SMITE 2 Conquest map. So rather than just like, okay, we need something new, just go take the thing that was mostly
copy paste.
Copy paste. We want to be a bit more deliberate when we bring it over, find out why it worked, find out what we liked about it, find out what we think we could change or tweak or make new about it that's going to be interesting for a more long term.
Cool. Sweet. Well, Pon, thanks so much for joining me on this episode of Titan Talk. Appreciate the back-to-back shows from you, man. It's been great having you for the last couple of episodes. Chat, thanks so much for chilling with us on a Monday. We will be back on Wednesday for another episode of Titan Talk. Yep. But before Wednesday is Tuesday, in Open Beta 14 is going live. So make sure you've got your alarm set, wake up early. Maintenance starts around 7 a.m. Eastern tomorrow morning, and you'll be able to play with Sun Wukong and all the other cool stuff that is going to be in our next update. But
hell yeah.
Until then, we will see you all on the battleground. Have a great rest of the day, everyone. Peace.